Sally YouTube, and welcome to this video all about the reverse culture shocks that I've had since arriving back in New Zealand 5 months ago now. I can't believe it's been 5 months already. That's crazy. And you know, I think with New Zealand, everyone kind of already knows about the nature. It's a really beautiful country. So, you know, I'm not going to focus on that stuff so much, but I'm going to more so focus on the behaviors of the actual New Zealanders themselves. But just on the nature, you know, outdoor vibe, I have to say that's been a huge improvement, I would say, to my quality of life. I absolutely love being able to just go on really nice walks and breathe in the sea air and everything. There's just so many things that you can do to feel good and get outside and move. So we're pretty lucky on that front. But anyways, I really wanted to talk about my culture shocks, as in the way New Zealanders think, act and behave. But before we get into it, I just want to quickly shout out this video's amazing sponsor, Skillshare. So if you don't know about it already, Skillshare is an online learning community that covers dozens of creative and entrepreneurial topics through thousands and thousands of classes that you can consume on their platform. And anyone who knows me knows that I am a huge personal development junkie, so I love the concept of Skillshare. Basically for a ridiculously small monthly fee, so less than US $10 per month on an annual subscription, you have access to these experts who are running courses teaching you basically anything you want. Can you imagine how much that would cost if you were paying to attend all of those workshops in person? As you guys know, I'm starting up my own business in New Zealand, so some of the classes that I've been taking have been how to build a website, email marketing, and I'm even doing, don't hate on me, I'm even doing a course on Instagram worthy photography. Okay, so how to use the power of your smartphone to take really compelling photos. But honestly, there's everything on here, from marketing to cross stitch to languages to creative writing. There's something for everyone. So if you're the kind of person that loves to learn new skills like me, or you just want to boost your CV, or get into a new hobby, or you want to build an online business as well, there's definitely going to be something for you. Now, when you have a premium membership on Skillshare, you can access all of the classes and communities that are perfectly right for you. And because Squarespace are kind enough to sponsor this video, you can sign up with the link in the description for a free 2-month trial. So enjoy, guys, and thanks Skillshare, I'm a really big fan. Okay, so let's get into these reverse culture shocks New Zealand edition. So the first one is not really a surprise to anyone, but it's that New Zealanders are very laid back, and there are good sides and bad sides to this. Okay, so I don't know if it's good or bad, but you often will see people walking around town, like Wellington City, especially near the coast and everything, barefoot, no shoes, no worries. You know, you see them at the petrol station putting petrol in their car, barefoot, casual. And along this note, you also see people in their pajamas at the supermarket sometimes. There's just way less pressure on how you look. I could go down to the shops in my track pants and jandals, and it just doesn't matter. Like, no one's judging me, and that's really cool. However, there are times that New Zealanders may come across as a little bit too relaxed, especially according to my French husband, who was telling me that he's been really surprised how openly, you know, especially just when you're hanging out with friends and stuff, people would burp in front of each other and even fart, to be honest. And especially if you're just with friends, and for him that is just horrifying. Like, that would never happen in France. And it's true. I mean, I guess what shocked him is that even in the workplace, like, people will be maybe eating a bit of lunch at their desks or whatever, and he might hear a colleague like burp, like, oh, pardon, and he'll be like, what just happened? Like, what just happened? And yeah, there's definitely like maybe an immature kind of humor around friends. Like, if someone accidentally farts, like, you all have a laugh about it. Oh, just saying this out loud makes me feel like we're this like uncultivated apes. But yeah, I don't know. I do wonder if it's because we drink a little bit more fizzy drink in New Zealand, but yeah, there's more on that a bit later. Culture shock number 2 is that New Zealanders really are so nice and just willing to help a stranger out. And a perfect example of this. So when we arrived in Wellington after our initial Airbnb and stuff, we actually rented a short-term apartment. And I was away up in Auckland and Niels was still here in Wellington, and he realized that he'd locked himself out of the apartment. Now, the person who was leasing us the apartment was overseas attending weddings in Europe, so we couldn't get hold of her, but luckily her sister had a spare key. Her sister was still living in town, but several suburbs away, probably around a 20-30 minute drive away. So Niels calls the sister, explains what's happened, and asked if he could please come and bike or bus and come and pick up the keys from her. And she was like, oh my gosh, don't worry about it, I'll come and drop them off. And this lady, I mean, it's like 7 o'clock at night, she's got kids. She's like, no, of course, like hops in her car, drives the keys all the way over, lets him in and drives back and just says, no worries, anytime if this happens again, like no worries whatsoever. And this is just one example, but I often have friends and people who have been to New Zealand really commenting to me on the fact that New Zealanders are really nice and friendly and just willing to help you out. Now, the only downside I can think about having really nice and positive people around you is that they are in New Zealand always encouraging you to look on the bright side and kind of get over it if you're down in a slump, right? So it's hard when you're feeling down or when you just want to vent, because you're not looking for solutions actually, you just want to vent and complain. Maybe that's the French in me now, but New Zealanders don't really let you get away with it. Either they kind of like start, you know, looking uncomfortable, like, okay, time to move on. I mean, what's the point in complaining? You know, they're saying, oh, you know, look on the bright side, or at least you've got this and stuff. And so it is harder here to have a good vent session. And I know that French people will know what I mean when I say that. In France, you can complain for days and get it all off your chest. Now, the next point is something social that I've kind of noticed, and honestly, I could do a whole video on this, but I'll try to sum it up in just a few minutes. There's just a huge difference in the approach to pregnancy and labor and parenting here in New Zealand compared to France. So when it comes to the labor, the general attitude in New Zealand would be around trying to avoid the epidural at all costs and try and do things as naturally as possible. Whereas in France, it's like epidural only. And when it comes to breastfeeding, for example, in New Zealand, people really go all in, and it would be really, really normal to see a woman aiming for 1 year of breastfeeding. That would be the ideal, right? And not to put any pressure on women that don't breastfeed, even though there is so much pressure on women who don't breastfeed in New Zealand. Even if we say there's not, it's obvious that socially and culturally people are like, oh, it's so much better to breastfeed. I've noticed, actually physically noticed, like cars that are like breastfeeding coach and we help you breastfeed and stuff like that parked in the street. So there's like a whole industry around it, and also women breastfeeding in cafes and in public and stuff, which I never ever saw that in France. And it's because it's not really accepted. It's viewed as a very private thing if it's happening, a very intimate thing. In France, they actually have the lowest rates of breastfeeding in the entire OECD. So in New Zealand, the values always sort of stem around, okay, very much so the way nature intended. And in France, it's very much like, well, the baby's coming into our life, our established life and routines, and the baby will fit in and the baby will adapt. So if breastfeeding makes you tired and makes you cranky and is starting to affect your relationship, I mean, you wouldn't breastfeed in France. I mean, it's not worth it. There's also a huge focus in France around getting the baby to sleep through the night, and there's a huge pressure on parents to have it happening by about 6 weeks old, which is unthinkable in New Zealand. It's normal that a baby wouldn't sleep through the night for maybe 6 months. And they will be willing to, you know, dabble into cry it out methods and that kind of thing to make that happen, because for the parents, they may want to go away for a weekend together after 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Oh my gosh, that's unthinkable in New Zealand. I mean, there's almost a badge of honor in New Zealand about not having a night off. Look, I'm not an expert on this. I obviously haven't had children, but I know that although it looks incredibly rewarding, it also looks very hard and very tiring at times. Big shake up to your family unit. And I think in France they try and minimize that. So it's not necessarily always what's best for baby and what will make baby happiest, but it's more so what's best for the whole family as a whole. And, you know, making sure that mum and dad are well rested, and also making sure that they keep their identities separate from just being mum and dad. My next point is around the administration. So no surprise, but after living in France for 6 years, I was surprised at how easy everything is here administratively. So Niels, for example, wanted a New Zealand driver's license. He goes into the office with his French driver's license and says, hey, I'd like to change it. What's the procedure? Where's the dossier? What do I need to fill out? They're like, no worries, swapped it on the spot, gave him a temporary license right there and then, and he received the real one a week later in the mail. Easy. When I wanted my driver's license in France, I literally waited at the Préfecture de Police de Paris for 6 hours. I took my ticket and I waited for 6 hours. I had to fill out a huge dossier. I had to bring so many pieces of paper with me. I spent about $200 getting certifications and stamped letters saying, you know, what did my full driver's license actually mean, and all of these kinds of things. And I was one of the lucky ones who was able to get it swapped out because I did it within 1 year of living in France. If you wait for longer than a year and try and swap out your foreign driver's license, you have to do the whole French driver's license, which can cost 1,300 euros, tens of hours of driving instruction, and even more paperwork. I mean, even going to the doctors here, we have our own like online medical hub, and every single time we go to the doctor, the entries get put on to our personal online hub, and we can click to repeat prescriptions without having to go back to the doctor, and just little things like that I think make our life administratively easier. I will say though that it was almost too easy in one respect, which is we were really surprised. We had been in the country for 2 months and we got a mortgage to buy a home. Like, Niels was still on his trial period at work and I was unemployed, and they didn't even look at our previous earnings in France really, because it didn't count obviously because they were in France. So they were like, oh, it was basically like, oh, you seem like a nice young motivated couple, of course we'll give you a mortgage. And I was like, oh my god, like okay. My next point is around food and eating, and New Zealanders are real foodies. We love our food, but in a very different way to the French, and we love to eat, and we love our treats, and we love snacks, and we love junk food and that kind of thing, and we drink a lot of fizzy drink. But I think the reason that we're not struggling with obesity as much as the US, for example, is only thanks to the fact that our outdoors are so enticing and people love to get out and go for walks, and like, you know, it's a very active lifestyle in general in New Zealand. I think that's our only saving grace. But yeah, I could absolutely run into a friend at 4 p.m. in the oh my god, I've been so busy today, I haven't eaten anything, all I had time to eat was a freaking muffin. Like, you know, just not eating on time, like French style. A French person would say it's not a very good approach, or it's not very good hygiene around food. Also a lot of snacking and stuff during the day, and also just a big shock around people drinking fizzy drink for lunch, you know, at lunchtime, which was never seen in France really. If you ever drink fizzy drink, I mean, you never drink fizzy drink with a meal really, and if you do, it's because you're having like nibbles, the apéro before a meal, and maybe you're treating yourself to a little fizzy drink in the evening, but otherwise they're a no-go. And what I will say, because I don't have my lovely baguettes anymore, is I eat way less bread here. I miss having that crunchy baguette, you know, with every single meal. Number 6 is that I've realized that New Zealanders really love their animals, especially like the domestic animals, especially their dogs and their cats. Because out of all of our friends and family, I'm struggling, like really struggling to think of someone that doesn't have a pet. And it just seems to be a little bit more next level in terms of the way that they're integrated into the family. Like, I think we treat pets more like humans compared to the French. So, you know, I was waiting in line at the vet the other day getting stuff for my foster kittens, and there was this guy like putting his cat into the care of the vets, and they were like, emergency contact, and he was like, her grandmother, blah 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 blah. And she's like, okay, so relationship to cat is grandmother? He's like, yes. Like, then it's a completely normal conversation. Like, you're your pet's mummy and daddy, and the parents are grandparents, and like they're really fur babies, and they're allowed to, yeah, snuggle on the couch with us watching TV and sleep in our beds, like at the foot of our beds and that kind of stuff. And I feel like in France there's a lot more sort of guidelines about the place of the animal versus the humans, I guess, in general. And the last point is around, I guess, what New Zealanders care about. So I've noticed that I've started caring about things that I haven't cared about for years. Birds, like New Zealanders are quite big on birds. Like, we just had this competition called Bird of the Year where we all vote for our favorite bird. Because New Zealand has no native land mammals, for the settlers it was a land of reptiles and birds. And so we've got a really interesting variety of birds that you can only find in New Zealand. And so now, like, I listen to bird song as I'm walking along. I'm like, oh, is that a tui? Like, I've never cared about birds, you know, but suddenly I do. We have our veggie garden here. We're trapping pests, like trying to make sure that we're pest free and predator free. We're spotting birds with binoculars in the forest. It's just, yeah, sometimes it just feels like a completely different world. If you guys like this kind of insight into my life here now in New Zealand, go and check out the video that I did on the things that I do and don't miss about France, because I definitely mentioned some things that will make you understand more about what it's like to live in New Zealand now compared to France. And I'll link my other New Zealand videos down below as well. I've got a whole playlist for you. So I hope you enjoyed this week's video, and I'll see you guys next time on the Not Even French channel. A bientôt!